Hello, my name is Michael Swain, and welcome back to Tales from the Pit. This is your content warning. This episode, I'll be discussing coping, healing, and support strategies with Samantha Lynn, a survivor of sexual assault. So please, make sure you're in a good headspace before you dive in. Sammy is also a talented singer-songwriter and speaker for RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. I think I speak for both of us when I say we sincerely hope that her wisdom and experience proves useful to anyone out there victimized in a similar way, or supporting a loved one who's been assaulted. You are not alone. Let's start the discussion off with a song of Sammy's written in the wake of her own attack. It's called Be Anyway.
I remember to eat today without being told. I didn't second guess my hunger. Why should I'm far too old to turn my pain into something I feel only I control. I might do something worse if I was bold. I remember to breathe today before it got too hard. I didn't hyperventilate, so it's a start. I recognize the warning signs of my racing heart. I'm far too busy anyway to fall apart. No, it's not a cry for help. I know you're worried about my health. I promise that I'm okay, or at least I will be anyway. And did I mention yet? I cleaned myself last night. Oh, I waited as long as I could before I had to see the sight of hands moving on my skin on my own. It just doesn't feel right, so I just let the water run till my skin feels tight. And did I mention yet? I got some sleep last night. Oh, for 2 full hours I was out like a light. But I woke up from that dream again, clutching my pocket knife. I couldn't fall asleep again, so I just got high. No, it's not a cry for help. I know you're worried about my health, but I promise that I'm okay, or at least I will be anyway.
Samantha Lynn, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me in the pit today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And I want to ask about coping mechanisms, because in that song you mention, I believe, cutting, and you mention getting high. Mm-hmm. And those are also coping mechanisms that I've reached for. And ultimately, you landed on songwriting, which I think, by and large, most people considered a more healthy coping mechanism. Can you sort of walk us through at what point in your journey you decided to turn your experience into a song?
So I'm not a workhorse kind of singer-songwriter. I'm not really able to just sit down and write anything that someone like throws a subject out and they're like, hey, can you write a song about this? Unfortunately, that's not how my brain works. So songwriting for me, it comes out of nowhere sometimes. And in my healing journey, I would say it had been about 5 months after I was sexually assaulted that I was able to turn my my healing towards something a little bit more productive, which was writing that song. It didn't come from me sitting down and saying, okay, I need to get this out. It started with a conversation that a friend who didn't know what was going on in my life just reached out and asked if I was okay, because they saw that there were some differences in how I was behaving. They saw I lost a lot of weight. They saw I wasn't going out as much. I wasn't being as social or active. And my response was, yeah, I'm okay. I swear I'm okay. Or at least I will be. And that just kind of pushed the focus to, wow, okay. This is the first time I've actually admitted to myself that I may not be fully okay, but I know I will be. And it just started pushing those, other coping mechanisms to the front, right? Getting high. It's not something that I was proud of, but it was something that made it so I could eat, so that I could sleep. That was what was helping me through that time. So putting it in song, putting it in, lyrics, matching it with music. As a musician, that part, it flows naturally and it's very cathartic. So just that whole experience of being able to put it down helped me share what happened to me without sharing what happened to me. Right. And it became this almost immediate understanding. The moment I shared this song with someone, and the moment I decided to play it at shows, or share it, on YouTube or any kind of social media.
Right.
I had people reaching out to me and saying, hey, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know what you're feeling. I know what you're going through because I've been there too.
And the song, as you say, seems to express the knowledge that there is a path before you where you will, end up someday in a more healed space than you were. You say that took about 5 months, I imagine, or correct me if I'm wrong, but was there a time when it did feel unrecoverable from?
Absolutely. For me, I stepped up to the line of suicide twice. And the thing with recovery and healing is that it is not a straight line. It's not a upward trajectory. There is up and down. There is, holy crap, I feel so good and nothing can sway me. And then the next day you feel that you can't go on. So that also is something that I try to convey in the song, because trauma, you can't decide when it comes back to you. It does get better. That's something that I did learn. It's been 5 years for me, and I have more good days than bad, but I still have to be very cognizant of when the trauma can be brought up in certain triggers. But absolutely, the coping that I was doing before I started sharing my story through song was not healthy, as we kind of mentioned before. Some people would
yet
say,
so human. I think a lot of us turn to the quick fix first, right?
Absolutely.
It's just easier to lay your hand to.
Absolutely. And it's, so there were people in my life that understood that was part of my coping. It wasn't fun for them to witness. It wasn't fun for them to see. But they understood that while it wasn't ideal, I was doing whatever I could, because I still, I wanted to continue, and I was trying to do everything I could to keep living.
Of course, please let me know if I'm getting anywhere near flooding you or triggering you or re-traumatizing you, because that's not what this is about. But I do want to let people listening who may be victims of assault themselves know that they're not alone. You know, that's a big part of this. And so I'll just ask, what do you think goes into that initial impulse, because it's a common facet of assault victims, to not share when they're, you know, ultimately reaching out and having a strong community supporting you seems to be an invaluable part of healing from almost any major trauma. What made you feel that either you couldn't or didn't want to do that at first? So
it's very interesting what I've been able to see the last 5 years and even a little bit before that. I think the Me Too movement happened a couple months after I decided to report. So it's interesting to see the shift in that stigma of assault victims, people, survivors of sexual assault or sexual violence. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of survivor's guilt. There's a lot of, well, I should have done this. I should have done that. You know, it's really my fault. I shouldn't have put myself in that situation, right? So there's a lot of blaming yourself. And I think that that's what prevents a lot. I mean, there's also a lot that goes into it. RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, where I'm part of the Speakers Bureau, they have all these amazing, horrific statistics. For instance, about 2 to 3% of assaulters will actually end up in prison or serving time. Even though 1 out of 6 women, 1 out of 33 men, over 60,000 children a year are victims of, you know, rape, abuse, or incest, the likelihood that the person responsible for that will actually, you know, do their time and justice will be served, it's very slim. So not only is there that shame, that guilt in some cases, there's also that, well, what is this going to do? What result is going to happen for me to report? And for me, with my experience, the reason why I did report wasn't because I wanted that individual to go to jail. I wanted to make sure that when he does that again, because statistically he will, there's a report of it, and that there is action taken down, written down, so that if things do escalate, there will be a paper trail of that, because I do not want to think that person did it again to someone else, and now someone else is feeling the same way that I did. So it was, you know, it was a big step for me. It was a big decision. Ultimately, I'm glad that I did it, but it's not easy, and it's. I feel very fortunate with the community around me, my family, my friends. They were very supportive, you know, not to, you know, they didn't ask a lot of probing questions, right? You know, they kind of just were there. They were there when I needed them. Sometimes it was just a matter of I called them up just to sit in silence. And having that, you know, ability to reach out to someone was amazing for me in my journey of recovery. Even though I did have the suicidal ideation, with such a supportive community, like it still happens. So right. You know, I think there's a lot happening in a survivor's brain, in whether or not they do try to report, or whether or not they feel that they can move on from that.
For comparison's sake, well, one of the forms of privilege that I have is I'm in this masculine body, and I've been told by, female friends many times that even those who have not, fortunately, been assaulted ever, that walking down the street's different if you're a woman. Was that something that you always lived with, and has that changed since? And then I guess what I'm getting at is, to what degree, if ever, does that heal again? Like, do you still have a fundamental mistrust of humanity, that you'll always carry with you?
That is actually very interesting. So I'm a lesbian. I'm in the LGBTQIA plus community, and I'm pretty androgynous. I do have a lot of feminine qualities, but I present on the masculine side. And this is how it's been. I've been comfortable in my skin for so long, and with what my identity is, that it never occurred to me that this would, no one ever thinks it's going to happen to them, right? But for so long, with my social circle, or even just outwardly in public, I've been able to kind of, I guess, covertly be a part of the guys, because when a man sees me, or someone male identifying, if they see me, they kind of assume, oh yeah, she likes girls, she gets it. And so there's a lot of misogyny that I witness. There's a lot of that kind of, oh, boys will be boys, you get it, it's just a joke, calm down kind of thing. So and even, statistically, you're more likely to be assaulted by someone that you know than someone you don't, and that was my case. The person that assaulted me was an acquaintance that I had known for years and had only known me as a lesbian. And so in my head, I'm thinking, well, that will never happen to me because
I'm insulated from that.
right? I'm one of the guys. But that's the thing about predators. It's not, it's never your fault, right? And the predator will always try to prey, regardless of where you feel you are at with your social status or your outward appearance. And so for me, it wasn't hard for me to go back into society as far as trusting other males around me, as in a stranger kind of way. It was more of the people that were closer to me that was really hard.
Tougher, right?
Because I was like, I
can't trust my acquaintances.
I felt safe, and I was wrong, right? But again, that's a lot of the survivor's guilt. That's a lot of the inward shame of, well, if only I had done something different. Which in any case, I could have tried to do anything different. He still would have tried to do what he did. Yeah.
And you mentioned the Me Too movement. Did that sort of coinciding with a part of your healing journey does that give you hope? Because I think another I might be speaking from a place of privilege yet again, but which is part of the reason we do this show,
right?
But I feel like the Me Too movement almost brought to light to me in a very real way that it wasn't before, the kinds of statistics you mentioned, and the realization that, after Harvey Weinstein and Louis C.K. and blah, 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 all these people in my quadrant, which is sort of entertainment industry, just realizing what a rape culture we still live in, how easy it is to get away with, especially if you're someone in a power position. How do you feel about the Me Too movement? Like, do you think it's leading us in a good direction? Did it provide solace or support to you to know that it's sort of more coming to light these days, or does it just make it feel like sexual assault is everywhere? So
awareness is important. Just like with representation matters, being aware and being vocal is so important for many reasons. For me specifically, once I started becoming vocal, that is kind of when my mentality shifted from being a victim to being a survivor. that was a huge moment in my healing journey of understanding. The more I talked about it and the more connection I was making with the people around me, understanding that, wow, this really is more common than what everyone thinks. That absolutely pushed me in a positive way to really start healing. And so it was interesting. So the Me Too movement, while it was happening, I was still kind of sitting in my funk. I wasn't trying to really get better. I didn't have that sense of hope yet. And the more I saw it, at first it was triggering. At first it was very triggering because, seeing on my Facebook, all of a sudden I'm seeing #Me Too, #Me Too. And I'm like, I've known these people that I've known for years, people, maybe even acquaintances, Facebook. And they have had that experience. Family members that I had no clue, because it's not something that you talk about. It's so taboo. Don't talk about that. That's unpleasant. Don't talk about that. And so to be able to vocalize that it's not just a statistic, like these are real people. I've seen something that said, every woman knows someone who has been sexually assaulted, but no man knows someone who is raped. Because it's not something that is talked about, because of that kind of personal shame that we have. So bringing that up, at first it was a trigger, but then the more I saw and the more I understood how important it was to speak up, it turned into more of a sense of power, a sense of community, that we are all together and all strong. And no matter what, wherever you are, there is someone that understands what you're going through.
Yeah, speaking of which, how did you ultimately come to RAINN and become a member of their Speakers Bureau?
I used a few different resources. Once I actually made the active decision to get better, it was the second time that I contemplated suicide. I had a counselor that I was seeing, and I remember the session so well, the moment that I know that she saved my life. She was, she was giving me advice or trying to show me how to get myself pulled out of this. And so in doing that, I looked up all these different resources. Here in the Seattle area, there is a resource called King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. And they actually were the ones that told me about RAINN. So I went to RAINN and I read through their articles. They have survivor stories. They have, videos and podcasts and local events. Had local events. The more I read survivor stories and the more I read about the organization, the more inspired I was to share my story myself, especially since at that time I have my song Be Anyway being shared and complete strangers coming up to me and just being like, thank you for sharing that. I know what you mean. So I felt this kind of call to action. And so I applied to be a part of their Speakers Bureau, and they responded. And ever since then, I've been trying to say yes as much as possible in order to really just continue with advocacy and bringing awareness to survivors. And so if I'm a big proponent of, you can't save everyone everywhere, but you can certainly save someone somewhere. And even if just one person can hear my story and get a little bit more hope than they had before, man, I would feel so good. So It's always scary. Like even now, and I appreciate you offering this safe space for me. It's, talking about my experience, there will be times where my voice will get shaky or I'll get that emotion come back up again, right? But that's, it's still healthy and it's still real and it's okay. And I want people to understand that too. It's okay. We can still talk about it.
Yeah. I'm prone to suicidal ideation, and we've done episodes on that before. Was that a factor in your life at all before the attack, or something that you were used to dealing with until this period?
That was brand new to me.
Brand new. Okay.
Brand new. I've had anxiety my whole life. I have had bouts of depression, but never like this.
Yeah.
I remember feeling it's not that I wanted to die. I just didn't know how I could keep going, because the pain was so much. It was unlike anything I had ever felt before. So
dying remains scary, but you wish you could not exist. Right?
Yeah.
That's sort of how it manifests for me, for sure.
Yeah. Like, why? I mean, I'm not religious. I don't know what happens, after. I just wanted it to be turned off, Yeah. I wanted to just flip the switch, and it seemed the easiest, like the path of least resistance. Like, this could all end now if I could just disappear.
Yeah. Not even in a dramatic way. You're just like, that would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, there's this feeling when you decide, you're like, huh. Like it's kind of surreal, and you're kind of like calm. At least in my experience, there's this like wave of relief almost once I decided, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to have some really good resources to pull me out of that. But there were moments where I was like, all right, well,
yeah. In my darkest depressions, I think the most insidious aspect of it is that it seems so sensible.
Yeah.
When you're in the midst of that, it feels like, well, I'm not depressed. I'm just seeing with true eyes finally that the world is shit. Yeah. I'm not even upset about it. I just see that.
I'm not even upset. Yeah, exactly. You get to that point and you're just like, all right, here we go. This is a good decision. We're just going to keep going with it.
Well, you mentioned a counselor helping pull you out of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they would say they helped you save your own life.
Yes.
But,
yes.
Talk to me a little bit just about that transition, or let's zoom in on that moment. How do you go from that sort of dark place of just accepting, well, this was a wash, I'm gonna check out, to the flicker of the desire to heal? Like, how does that begin for you?
Oh man. So this is one of those times where if I do start talking about it and the emotions do come up, understand I'm okay. Okay. Again, this is just a wonderful safe space for me, and I want to be authentic. So when the last time when I made that decision, I wrote a list of names. I wrote a list of everyone that I wanted to say goodbye to. And I started writing goodbye letters specifically for each person. Mm-hmm. The next day, I went to my counseling session and I told her what I had done. And my counselor knew me very, very well. I had been going to her long before this ever happened. And when I told her what I had done, she just looked at me and said, Sammy, do you want to die? And I answered the same way that we were just talking about. I said, well, no, I mean, not really, but I don't know what else to do. I
can't keep feeling this way.
Yeah, it's the weight is so heavy, and I feel like I'm in this fog of no progress and no hope. I can't see a life past this. I can't see how I can thrive. And she said, I cannot help you. If you want to tell me that you want to die, then we might as well end this session right now. And it shocked me. It put and I think this worked just because of our relationship, right? This might not work with other people. But she came down on me really hard. She said, I literally, we don't need to continue on, because if your end goal is to die, then we don't need to have this conversation anymore. But what you're telling me is that you don't want to die. And that's where I can help you. And it shocked me. I didn't understand. I thought, wait a second, whoa, aren't you supposed to like kind of like coddle or like maybe hold my hand or say everything's going to be okay? She straight up just went hard. And it was what I needed in that time, because it made me realize that, and this is another thing, when I was sexually assaulted, when that happens to someone, you either fight, flight, or freeze. And I froze. And so the guilt in my head of I could have done something more was because I froze and I didn't do anything. And she, in that moment, allowed my thinking to expand, that I have a choice, that I can sink or swim, that I can fight or fly, when all I ever thought I could do was freeze. That's all I ever thought I could do. And she told me that I could do more, that I don't have to be frozen. And so there was definitely some silence. There was definitely some more conversation. But at the end of that session, she said, I want you to go home, and for every person that you wrote down in that list of names, I want you to write a paragraph for each person on why and how much you love them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I said, I could write novels. And she was like, well, then why don't you then? Write a novel. Write a novel. Like, that like kind of like, spitting back at me for what I'm trying to give her sass on. And then I said, okay. And she said, and when you're done, I want you to read each paragraph and understand that for every reason why you love them, there's a piece of that in you. For every reason that you love someone, there's a piece of that in you. And I will never forget that. I have used that in multiple, conversations in my life of understanding when I look at my sister and I admire her strength, it's because I'm strong too. And I can see that, and we can be mirrors for each other. When I admire someone for their honesty, when I admire someone for all these amazing characteristics, it's because they're important to me, because I can also instill those. So that was yeah. So that's what pulled me out. And man, did she like yank me. She just yanked me out. And I will always be grateful for that moment.
Well, sadly, I think everyone, along with universal health care, should have counseling provided by the state, high-quality therapy. And I'm very grateful that you had that in your life at that time. But some of our listeners or people write in and say, I don't have the good fortune or finances or time to make space for therapy and counseling. So I want to talk a little bit about practical coping mechanisms that maybe you found throughout the process, or we talked, of course, about songwriting, but are there other coping mechanisms you eventually landed on that you would advise victims to pursue?
Absolutely. So, yes, music has always been such a big influence in my day-to-day life. So, not everyone takes a shining to, writing down thoughts. Not everyone, takes a shining to playing instruments and putting that in that as an outlet for coping. For me, one of the healthier coping mechanisms that I did have was allowing myself to be open to physical touch again. And this is very specific to my trauma, but allowing myself to work up to hugging people again. It was something that after I didn't want to hug my mom. I didn't want to hug anyone. So what I would do is I would hand hug. I would kind of handshake, but kind of, hold it in a little bit different way when I would greet people. And it helped me cope with the feeling of loneliness or dirtiness or just that shame that I felt because I didn't want to be touched. To be able to do that with my friends and family around me and have them be accepting of that was something that really helped me push through as well, because I think that it's only natural to want to feel close to people, and so that definitely helped me as well. The other coping mechanisms that I had was, I think we just already touched on it, but just speaking out. And even if it is in vague terms, even if it is not directly talking about, why you are in this state, talking to someone with an open ear. I utilized the Suicide Hotline quite a few times. RAINN has a National Sexual Assault Hotline as well. That's free and 24/7. But just, it's a lot easier said than done. I know, when people are like, I don't have access to counseling. When you call these kind of hotlines, for the most part, when you get someone on the other line, that is exactly what they're there to do, is listen and just make sure that you're safe. And they don't even know you. And it kind of is easier that way sometimes. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it was sometimes easier to call a hotline so that no one knew me. And I was...
Right. Yeah. I'd love to demystify that for people so they feel... And we'll put those numbers in the show notes on our website. But it can be very freeing. And I have made use of the Suicide Hotline. And you definitely feel the ability to just dive in right away. And there's less complex layers, or at least I've found that if I'm confiding that I'm suicidal to a close friend, there's the added layer of, am I weak by admitting this to them?
Right.
Am I a burden to them? Is this a hassle for them to hear? But a complete stranger who, for whatever reason, good reasons, but you don't have to worry about why they're there or why they decided to do this with their time, but you can just let it all out. And I think that is a very good way to go. And I'd love to demystify that for people. So what was the first hotline experience like? What was the person on the other end like?
The first one, that was probably the closest to I came to acting for committing suicide. I called and a man picked up, and I didn't feel comfortable. And I said, hey,
sure.
Can you transfer me to a woman? And he couldn't. And he said, I can't, but if you call back again, odds are you will get a woman. Do you feel safe enough to hang up and call back? Because he didn't want me to be just gone and like give up hope. And I said yes. So I hung up and called back. Second try, I got a woman. And
sorry to interrupt, but if you can, I elucidate it, and it's fine if it's indefatigable, but what do you think gave you that impulse when you're at the point of this strong ideation? Because it takes so much strength to pick up the phone. What do you think gave you that strength?
My mom. So when I was assaulted, I ended up moving back in with my mom. And I was somewhere driving home at 1:00 in the morning. And the extreme urge, because to just crash my car. I was going 110 on the freeway, and I just said, man, I could just turn so quickly right now. What stopped me was the thought of my mom getting a phone call in the middle of the night, or waking up and finding that my car wasn't there. Right. So I pulled over and called, and the woman stayed on the phone with me for 2.5 hours and until I safely got home and figured out a plan for the next day. But I really can say that I'm extremely privileged with the friends and family in my life who have shown me unconditional love, and I know not everyone has that. But the sheer idea of my mother and the pain that it would have caused her, that was enough for me to call. It still wasn't enough for me to say, I'm done with thinking of suicide.
I'm not changing my plan. I'm just going to do the courtesy of calling at least. Yeah,
exactly. Right. So
I similarly went to AA for the first time thinking, well, I'll just do this as a technicality. And then I'll still stay alcoholic.
Right.
And no one can say I didn't try. I tried your stupid thing.
Exactly. And then, oh crap, it worked. Oh great, now I have more work to do, so
right, of course.
Like the other one was just, it would have been so much easier, but so I that's actually how my suicidal ideation evolved into writing a list of names and saying goodbye specifically, rather than an impulsive act. So the first time was more of an impulse. The second time was, this is a plan. This is happening. So
how or what advice would you give to, because I don't know that I'm not sure that it's a one-size-fits-all solution to be very sassy and go hard at assault victims.
Right. Yeah.
What advice could you give to the supporters, to people who know assault victims, or people who might be in the position of being in the support network of a victim, a survivor, I should say, I'm sorry. Is there any advice you could give as far as the kinds of support, or is it, I don't know, maybe it's individually tailored and there's no right answer to this, but I'm just wondering how I or anyone who's in the support position, what's the best thing we can do? Is it to try and connect, or is it to give someone space, or do you think it varies from person to person and situation to situation?
I think it does vary, but I think there's this. I think what can be pretty universal as far as advice for support, if you do know someone that is going through their healing journey after being assaulted, is to do your research. Do your best to look up, for instance, just with my mother again. One day I came outside of my room after being in there for a few days, and I saw her at the kitchen table with pamphlets from King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. And she said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm here and I am reading a lot of stuff. And if ever you want to talk, we can talk. And it was it had a huge impact on me, because what a lot of people don't realize in the support aspect is that you are also going through a traumatic experience. You are witnessing someone that you love go through this. It's gonna affect you, and it's okay that it affects you. Like, that doesn't make it about you. But what you can do is just do research. Reach out to those assault resource centers, right? You can reach out to RAINN. You can reach out to your local chapter and just read about it, right? Get the advice from the experts. If you have a counselor, ask your counselor. Talk it out with your counselor, because the last thing you want to do is burden that on the victim of, hey, right, tell me what you're going through, or tell me how I can, help you. Is just be that open ear, be that open support, and read and learn. And I think that would help a lot of people in those instances. But again, everyone's different.
Of course.
That was something that just truly helped me, was an ally, someone doing their own research and educating themselves.
You described, or I feel like you alluded to, sort of coming to a place of recognition that literally you were victimized, that the other person was a predator, and that there's no shame in being the victim of predatory behavior. Was that crystallized in a moment, or was that just a slow, steady coming to that conclusion?
It is still something that I battle with. It is still, we all have those times where it's in the back of our head, like, hey, you're not good enough.
Right.
But in this case, this one is like, hey, it's all your fault. Every now and then it still comes up. And it was a slow process for me to try to turn that thought process. And again, I think just for me, what really helped was just talking about it more, so that I could shift that lens. But just like with trauma, with anyone that has experienced PTSD, you could be having the best day ever, and then something will happen, and then you're right back to square one. Same thing with that whole victimization. I know logically that it's not my fault. I know logically that it is never the victim's fault.
Right.
But that doesn't stop that monkey, you know?
It's different from feeling it in your bones. Yeah.
So you can, and it helps saying it, right? Even saying it out loud. It is not my fault. It is not my fault. To hear it from everyone else too. Like my wife, when I first met her on our first date, I mentioned that I was a survivor, and she sat across the table from me saying, me too. And, so having someone that understands that connection, and being able to, without hesitation, like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Yeah. I believe you, and it's not your fault. And it really speaks volumes.
Well, as a musician, I also wanted to ask, are there any other songs or artists, because it's not an often talked about topic, not talked about enough, and even more rare, I think, is the music about sexual assault. Is there any other work in this area that helped you, or even if it's not on topic, was there music that served as a coping mechanism for you? Because not that, no song can heal trauma per se.
Yeah.
But I've definitely found certain artists and music and books, like, is there any sort of media experience that helped you through this period, or is it too big for that?
Specifically the thing that came to mind when you said that, Andrea Gibson is a poet, and they have a poem called Blue Blanket. And in there, they discuss, it's not about what you're going to tell your daughter. It is about what are you going to teach your son. And it talks about, that process. It's a very heavy song. If anyone's going to song, it's a very heavy poem. If anyone's going to listen to their spoken word, just make sure you're in a good headspace, right? Make sure you're safe. But that one definitely came to mind. It was something that I would listen to, and a lot of emotions would come through. There would be a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, but also an understanding that, again, I'm not alone. I will say that, as far as music goes, just to be very cognizant of where your headspace is at with that kind of music. For me, at one point, I thought that a particular song was helping me, and it ended up being the song that I had on repeat while I was impulsively deciding I wanted to crash my car. So it's very important that you are just,
they crystallize our emotional states, right? And you can get yourself into like a music K-hole, so to speak, for sure.
It's like a mantra, right? It just like keeps going and going, and you just kind of get lost in it. But specifically, music that helped me through it, honestly, after I was assaulted, I actually was still in school for audio engineering. And I became one of the staff engineers at a studio in Seattle after I graduated. And it wasn't any particular song or musician that came in that helped me, but working with clients weekly and hearing people's individual stories of how they were able to write songs is what really helped me too. Because these songs, they are representations of people's lives in a certain moment. And that can change over time. Like for me with Be Anyway, I do not sing it the same way that I used to 5 years ago. I sing it in a hopeful way most of the time. Sometimes I sing it in a very, weepy kind of way because it gets to me. Sure. And sometimes I can disconnect from it and just play and just be a musician and be able to share myself without feeling like I'm in that hole again.
Just the sheer therapy of doing the creative act itself certainly is a thing. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, if you were listening to this episode, what would you most want to hear? Is it as simple as you're not alone? Is it there are people to be reached out to? Like, what is a practical piece of advice for someone who, maybe is early on in their healing journey and still in that dark place? What would you tell them? It's a tall order.
It is a tall order. No, it's all good.
We're reaching the climax of the interview.
I always appreciate these questions because it helps remind me that the advice that I do give out is applicable to me. And I forget that sometimes, right? It's always like, oh yeah, just do as I say, not as I do. For me, what I would say to anyone listening, feeling wherever they are in their journey, or even if they're just sitting in their own muck, that's okay. Understand that you are worthy of recovery. No caveat. No, there's no entry. There's no ante and in. Like you are 100% worthy of recovery. Full stop.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not, I think I would add that you're not failing by being in that dark place.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Exactly. It's a reasonable response to trauma.
Yeah, sit in it.
And it doesn't mean it will always be that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. And I do that all the time for myself too. And if things are going bad, it's okay to sit in that muck. Just understand it's possible to get out and you're worth moving past it.
I want to get back to that humanity question, just only insofar as I hate to ask this because I don't want to get a bummer answer, but okay. We're here to be honest.
Absolutely.
Okay, full disclosure, I Googled recently because I watched this movie, The Last Duel, which is about a sexual assault and the duel fought over, but it's through the lens of, weren't things bad in the Dark Ages when a woman could be so easily sexually assaulted? And it sort of enraged me only because I was like, I don't even know if sexual assault is any less common than it was. Like it is, when you dig into the statistics, it's a very common experience. And does that make you feel that it's more survivable, that others have gone through it, or does that piss you off, or is it both?
There is so much anger, honestly, that anger rises in defense of something sacred, right? So if there is a reason why I'm angry, it's because there are people out there being subjected to this kind of pain. And there are still people out there that push the blame on the victim, right? There are, a lot of people in power that are not willing to admit that they themselves are predators, right? So, there's a lot of anger and a lot of, man, there's no justice.
Right.
So as far as like humanity goes, so I will say, and I believe this is still on RAINN. I don't remember the exact statistic, but sexual assault has gone down. I think it's the last 20 years is what it said. But there's also, has it gone down, or have people stopped reporting? Has it gone down, or are people just not feeling comfortable? So I think that, the bummer answer is like everyone's crap. Everyone is, people are mean, people are horrible, and there's always horrible people. What's the point kind of thing?
Well, and the statistic you quoted about the number of predators who are actually brought to justice is disgusting.
Yeah, you look at that.
That's ridiculous.
And you say, what's the point? What's the point? Well, the point is that you never know. You never know what grain of sand is going to start the pearl. You never know when that push, that societal shift will happen. And I think we're seeing it right now in many political environments, like, Gen Z coming up and not taking any prisoners. I'm so excited to see what that generation's going to do.
Love Gen Z.
Right?
I have so much hope for Gen Z.
Oh my gosh. I am so excited to see what's going to happen in the next 20 years, 30 years. New waves of understanding what's right and wrong. And really, that does give me hope. I have always been an optimistic person. I've always been, glass half full, and that whatever's in the glass, I bet you it tastes good. Like, I'm just an optimistic kind of person. And even with the experiences that I've had, I'm still very optimistic that things will change, because they are, and it's microscopic. But that's okay, because what we need more now is we need the allyship. We need people who maybe haven't experienced it to come forward and stand by people that have survived it. You see it with different cultures. I see it with my LGBTQIA plus community, the Black community, and Indigenous people, and it's just, there's so much movement in gaining allies and speaking up against injustice, that we are going in the right direction. We just can't lose focus, and we can't lose steam.
What sort of topics are you, well, first of all, are you working on any songs right now?
Oh.
I wanted to ask a little bit about your current musical endeavors, and like, do you imagine returning to this topic, or what are other topics you explore in your music?
So I'm working on a full-length album right now. I just have an EP out, Team Sammy, on any platform that you stream music. And it has just kind of a mixture of songs or styles that I'm able to do. But right now my passion is just getting back to my foundation of vocals and guitar, just true singer-songwriter fashion. And so in this album, I'm focusing a lot on, there's a lot of songs dedicated to the friends in my life. There are a couple songs that have to do with trauma and moving forward from that. I do a lot of symbolism with elements, like with water, fire, earth, air, and contribute that to how I live my life and how I see this life and this world. So I actually am hoping to release that by the end of this year. And with that, I will be re-releasing my song Be Anyway on the album, which I actually just finished a music video for, that I worked with a very talented photographer, Amanda Summerlin, in Georgia. She took it on as a passion project because of how much this song impacted her. Yeah. And she really, honestly, is the only person I would ever trust to put what I put down musically into a visual interpretation. So that's currently what I'm working on right now, and I'm very excited. Music has always been a passion no matter what has happened in my life. So I'm just very thankful that I can have that medium and just, share it with everyone else. It's a beautiful feeling, I want to connect.
I feel like that must have been a surreal healing experience to be on that set filming that. That's very cool.
Oh, yes.
Right. I think that's all I've got for you, Sammy, but I am so grateful. That is incredibly generous of you to share your experiences, and I know that it'll help a lot of our listeners out, allies and survivors both. If people do want to stay abreast of your music, find you online, where can they do that? Do you have any social medias?
Yeah, they can go to SamanthaLynnMusic.com. I also have a Facebook group, Samantha Lynn Music. I wish I was good with Instagram. I'm trying. But, you can also find me there, Samantha Lynn Music. But for the most part, I try to post things on my Facebook. And then there are resources on my website when you first get there to the RAINN organization and the hotline. Just in case anyone needs extra support, they can always go there and find resources as well.
Absolutely. And do you consider yourself a folk artist at all? I've only heard B anyway so far. Or you like to say singer-songwriter? 'Cause I ask because my uncle is a folk musician.
Yeah.
And your music gave me kind of the same feels that his stuff sometimes does.
I definitely have identified as a folk artist, singer-songwriter, folk, acoustic.
I think singer-songwriter sells better these days.
Yeah, it's hard to put myself in a box. Anytime I try to upload something and they say, "Hey, what style is this?" I say, "I don't know." But some people have
genres are bullshit. Anyway.
Genres are bullshit. Someone once said I was a cross between Alanis Morissette and the Chicks, and I said I'll take it.
Hey, that ain't bad.
That ain't bad at all.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again. SamanthaLynnMusic.com. Check it out. We will have links to resources in the show notes and, of course, at Sammy's website, as we just mentioned.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
It.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, Michael. And just anyone that's listening, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.